Hi everybody, Peter here once again. Thanks for joining me on my channel. If it's your first time here, this is Thailand Bound. Right, today I'm going to be reading out 3 more viewer stories that have been sent in to me, 3 good stories. Before I get into these 3 stories, just another quick reminder that tonight I will be live streaming at 9 p.m. That's 9 p.m. UK time. So if you've got nothing better to do, why not come along and join in the chat? And it was quite a good chat last week, and hopefully we'll see you in the chat this evening. All right, so let's not waste any time. Let's jump straight into the first story, and I think you're going to enjoy these 3 this time. So here we go.
สวัสดีค่ะ
I was in my late 20s when I first visited Thailand, and my initial motive for visiting the kingdom was due to the fact I had a relative that had decided to retire in the country, and he had encouraged me to visit him in Koh Samui. I was fortunate enough to be able to afford to visit at such a young age because I had learnt a trade back in the UK that paid reasonably well at the time. Needless to say, I went on to have a lot of fun while visiting Thailand, and despite being in my late 20s, I had become accustomed to the tricks the bar girls play and how foreign guys can get fooled and how typically foreigners can be looked upon as walking cash machines. I ended up experiencing all of these and eventually got wise to the tricks. The real story starts when my cousin brought his Thai girlfriend back to the UK. She was from Isan, and I would regularly visit my cousin and his Thai girlfriend in the UK. When I visited, my cousin's Thai girlfriend would often cook for me. She came across as a caring and kind girl, and I was always very respectful towards her, calling her A. I helped her when arriving and then again while leaving. I think she really appreciated this. I had enjoyed visiting Thailand, loved the culture, climate, food, thought the people were friendly, and found Thai ladies to be the most attractive I had ever seen in my life. I wanted a long-term serious relationship with an honest Thai girl, not a bar girl who I had met and had tried to have a relationship with in the past. Going back to my cousin's Thai girlfriend, one evening I explained to her that I was serious about finding a genuine and honest Thai girlfriend. Her reaction was quiet at first, but then as she realised I was being serious, she told me that she may know a lady that was about my age, maybe a little bit older, and was from the north of Thailand, a region called Isan. My cousin's girlfriend also explained that May, the lady I was to be introduced to, worked in a similar profession as me, so perhaps we would have a lot in common and could end up being a good match, similar age, with similar professions, etc. As I started hearing more and more about May, I was getting very excited at the prospect of meeting her. I asked my cousin's Thai girlfriend to introduce me to May as soon as possible, even if it could only be remotely over an app. That same evening, my cousin and his girlfriend had several drinks. My cousin's girlfriend phoned May and eventually went on to explain who I was and that I planned to visit Thailand in a few months and had wondered if May wanted to meet up with me while I was in Thailand, especially since it seemed we had a lot in common. While being introduced to May over Skype, she looked very attractive. She was a very attractive girl with long hair, soft brown skin, and spoke fluent English. In fact, the best English that I had ever heard a Thai person speak. She seemed to be very ambitious and even mentioned that she planned to go to the UK one day to study for her master's degree. Clever girl. I was blown away and just wanted to meet her. After the introduction, me and May exchanged phone numbers so we had each other's contact details. After our initial introduction, May and I ended up communicating every day, whether it was by line, Skype or email. We just had some form of daily communication, and the fact that our jobs were similar helped as we could relate to each other's daytime work. At the time, it was clear that our conversations were effortless, and we were both getting excited to meet each other. Needless to say, the countdown to my trip to Thailand couldn't have come sooner. One day, while having one of our daily conversations, May said she could take me to Koh Samet for a day and a night when I arrived, and then she would have to return to work, which was about 20 kilometres outside of Bangkok. As May and I spoke more and more, she revealed to me in another conversation that she had mentioned me to her mother and that her mother wanted to invite me to their home in Isan for a couple of days. I'd never been to Isan before, but I knew it was known for being one of the most deprived regions of Thailand. I agreed to go and said I was excited to visit Isan since I had never visited before. This much was true. Eventually the day came when I was to depart from Heathrow and land in Bangkok. I was so excited to meet May and get back to Thailand. On landing at Bangkok airport, I was so eager to exit the aircraft that I had forgotten a bag of stupid souvenirs I had bought for May at Heathrow airport. Just some chocolate, a key ring, English biscuits, etc. However, thinking back, maybe this was a blessing in disguise, as it might have come across as tacky and cheap. When I eventually met May, she was waiting for me at the meeting point with a female colleague. I hadn't been told by May that she would be bringing company with her. I appreciated the fact that I could have been anyone at the end of the day, especially since we had never actually met in person, and for all she knew, I could have been some kind of sick weirdo. We walked to the parking lot and I got in the back of May's car, which was the latest Honda Accord. Money obviously was not an issue for her. It had been planned that we would spend one night in Pattaya, then head down to Koh Samet early the following day. May had booked 2 rooms, one for her and her colleague and a room for me, where I spent the night alone. I remember thinking about the crazy nights I had had in Pattaya on past trips to the land of smiles and in particular Pattaya. I told myself that I was onto a winner, so I should behave myself. May, her colleague and I had dinner in a nearby restaurant and then returned to our rooms about 10 p.m. that evening. I'd never been to bed so early, but I was tired from travelling anyway, and I knew we would have an early start that I really did not mind. The following morning, May knocked on my door at around 8 a.m. and said that it was breakfast time. She looked amazing, even though she wasn't wearing any makeup. She just had a great natural, fresh, beautiful look about her. After breakfast, we checked out of the hotel and drove to the port of Koh Samet, where we were to stay for a night. May, her colleague and I took a speedboat over to the island and enjoyed a day on the beach. I remember we ate at one of the little restaurants and May complained about the food to the waiter and insisted that a new dish was prepared. I thought to myself, if this was the UK, this restaurant would be so popular and they would never get a complaint. To me, the food was amazing. Later on in the afternoon, May's colleague left and took the ferry back to the mainland, leaving me and May alone, which is what I had craved for so that we could get to know each other much better. May seemed to be quite open and it appeared we were on the same wavelength. We shared a lot of laughs and I enjoyed her company. May had booked a hotel room for us in Koh Samet that had 2 separate beds. We spent the night in the same room but in separate beds. We woke up early the next day for breakfast and a swim in the sea and a little walk before heading back to the mainland. May had to work for a few days just outside Bangkok before we could go to her hometown in Isan. So she dropped me off in a budget hotel in Bangkok and she went off to work. I really wanted to get intimate with May, but I kept telling myself to be patient because a good Thai girl won't let her guard down overnight. I spent 2 days being a good boy in Bangkok, visiting the usual hotspots, Khao San Road, Nanaplaza, etc. before May picked me up from the hotel and we drove to Bangkok Don Mueang Airport, where we were to fly to Phuket in Isan. Upon arriving in Isan, May's mother and younger brother were waiting for us. I said, "Sawadee-kap," and then we were driven to May's home. May's house showed no signs of being deprived or disadvantaged. In fact, my first impressions were positive and the family certainly didn't show any signs of poverty. The house had a big driveway, gardens and several bedrooms. The following day, a day trip had been arranged by May's mother. May, her mother, her brother, myself and various other relatives visited waterfalls and mountains and were driven to various scenic points of the region around Phuket. I wasn't sure if this had been planned just for me, but I really enjoyed it. We also got to eat at a few different restaurants along the way, all of which the food was delicious and very, very cheap. I tried to pay a few times, but a relative of May's always stopped me from doing so. After spending 2.5 days in Isan, it was time for May and me to fly back to Bangkok. While in the airport in Isan, I offered May's mother 5,000 baht as a gesture of goodwill to cover expenses, but she refused. Upon landing at Bangkok, May said that I could stay with her in her town where she works if I wanted to, and of course I agreed. I just wanted to be with May as much as possible. We went to May's residence. It was a Thai shop, one up, one down. which she rented. She explained that we would have to share a bed due to the restrictions of the house and apologised for the situation. But of course, I nearly started jumping up and down with excitement at this news. That night, sharing the bed with May, well, let's just say even May is human, and you can guess what followed. The following morning, while May was getting ready for work, she was very embarrassed and apologised for what had happened and said that it wouldn't happen again. I was confused but told her that she had nothing to be sorry for and that I didn't regret what had happened. After May went off to work, I wondered why May had been so embarrassed. That day, I killed time by borrowing a neighbour's bicycle and rode around the town. It was quite boring where May stayed. Other than a petrol station and a few open markets, it didn't seem to offer much in the way of entertainment. On the second evening, while in bed, the first night was repeated. The following morning, May didn't apologise and seemed to be more relaxed while she was getting ready to go to work, unlike the last experience. The previous evening, I had asked May if she was able to take another day or two off work so we could take another adventure, but she said she would have to ask her manager. I appreciated this because for many Thais to take time off work can be very difficult or even impossible. May came home later that day and said her boss had granted her 2 days off, and she suggested that we spend the 2 days in Hua Hin. May and I headed to Hua Hin and we visited various areas of the city. I can remember May explaining to me that generally speaking, Thai people prefer to spend their leisure time in Hua Hin, but foreigners prefer Pattaya. After enjoying my time in Hua Hin with May, it was time for us to return to Bangkok once again, which would actually be my last night before returning back home to the UK. I had already booked a good room in a luxury hotel that had set me back a bit, but had hoped May would be spending my last night with me. We were about halfway between Bangkok and Hua Hin when May suddenly said that she would be spending the night at her colleague's house, the same colleague who I had met on the first day. I felt so disappointed that May wasn't going to spend my last night with me, despite the wonderful time we'd had together, knowing that it would be several months before I would be able to return to Thailand. I went quiet for the rest of the journey as I didn't feel like talking to May as I was so disappointed. When we finally reached my hotel, I asked May why she didn't want to spend my last night in Thailand with me, especially since I wouldn't be back for some time. She replied that it was a cultural difference. I told her that she didn't have to pick me up the following morning and take me to the airport, that I could just take a taxi instead. May said, "No, I will be here to take you to the airport in the morning, 9 o'clock sharp, I'll be in the reception." I went up to my hotel room very deflated and disappointed. My new room had a king-size bed, fantastic views overlooking Bangkok. You name it, it was in that room, but I was alone. I wondered whether to just go to bed and end the day or whether to go out. After debating with myself what to do, I thought I'd try and find a bar with a band and have a few quiet beers. I couldn't find anything in the immediate area, so I took a taxi and went to Nanaplaza. Before I knew it, it was 2 a.m. and the bar I had been sitting in called last orders. Despite having drank a lot, I didn't feel drunk, but thought I had better make my way back to the hotel for my morning flight. On the way back to my hotel, I came across a little street bar and a very pretty waitress was serving drinks. Not only did I fancy another drink, but the waitress was unbelievably attractive. I ended up having several drinks in the street bar, and while there, a few of the pretty waitress's friends turned up. They asked if they could sit at my table since the other tables were occupied and I was sitting alone. I ended up talking to all of them and they explained they were going to party once their friend, the pretty waitress, finished work. I tried politely to decline and explain I had to leave at 9 o'clock in the morning to catch a flight, but they eventually persuaded me to join them, plus I still didn't feel drunk. Looking back, I probably didn't need much persuading anyway. We ended up going to a nightclub that had mostly Thai customers, and from what I remember, I was drinking and dancing all night long. The pretty waitress said to me, "You have a flight, you should go back to your hotel car." It was about 6 a.m. The pretty waitress came outside with me to help me get a taxi, and I could tell she wanted to come with me. I wanted to invite her so much, but thought about May and still hoped things might work out with her in the future. I slipped a 500 baht note into the pretty girl's hand and wished her well. I'd had a lot of fun that night because of her and could leave on a high. Only in Thailand could this happen. The following morning, my hotel phone was ringing. I picked it up startled and it was May. She said, "Where are you? It's 9:30 already." I pounced out of bed, leapt into the shower, grabbed my luggage where May and her colleague were waiting for me in the reception. Not a lot was said on the way to the airport. On arriving at the airport, there was still a little extra time, so May and her friend took me to the airport cafe for some breakfast. Again, not a lot was said and I didn't have the energy to make conversation. Having had a heavy night before, saying goodbye, I slipped 10,000 baht into May's hand to cover any expenses she had acquired as a result of my stay. If anything, for the time she took off work to be with me. I'm not stupid and some might think I am, but I wanted to give that 10,000 baht to May. I really did, and it was my choice. We said our goodbyes without any physical contact and wished each other well. When I arrived back in the UK, I had no messages or correspondence at all from May. She had not even asked if I had got back safely. I decided eventually to make contact with May again. When I finally did make contact with her, she was very short and brief in her messages and wasn't forthcoming like she had been prior to me meeting her in Thailand. No video calls either. After a month or so, I asked her if anything was wrong and why things had become stale between us. She eventually replied, "For personal reasons, I do not want a boyfriend." I backed right off from her and our regular communication stopped, although I told her that I respected her decision. I have been back to Thailand several times since meeting May, but I have not seen her since that first trip. I still have her contact details and she messages me once a year on my birthday, but now I don't really have an appetite to visit May again. Funny enough, she used to visit Germany from time to time on business and would message me out of the blue to see if I wanted to meet her. Even once saying that there was no need for me to pay for accommodations since she already had a room that I could stay in. I am not sure if your viewers will find this story boring, as May was not a bar girl and my experiences were only good, but to anyone who might think it is impossible to meet a nice Thai girl, it isn't. Just don't look for her in a go-go bar, a beer bar or a massage parlour. That was a nice story, wasn't it, guys? I didn't find that boring at all. I thought that was a really nice story, and it just shows you can actually go to Thailand and strike up a relationship and have a lot of fun. And I think both of them had a good time together. I'm not sure about May's agenda there. There was some undercurrent, wasn't there? But I'll leave that for you guys to work out for yourselves. Okay, so if you're one of those people who have ever thought about retiring to Thailand and perhaps you thought about buying your own property, this is a good story. It will give you an insight into what happened to this guy. Nothing bad, but it will give you some ideas and it will give you something to think about if you're thinking about buying property. Hi Peter, my story is not a story about bar girls, go-go bars or other things like that. The first time I came to Thailand was in 2003. I went to Phuket. It was my first tropical holiday and quite magical to me. I enjoyed it all and felt so relaxing with the smiling Thai people, the crystal clear waters, the white beaches. I stayed in a 4-star hotel. Exactly a year later, that same hotel was destroyed by the tsunami, as a picture of the hotel was on the cover of my local newspaper. A few years later, I went to Thailand again, this time to Bangkok and Chiang Mai. I then also got lucky to get a job in Malaysia, where I lived for 4 years. The main thing I learned there was that my love for the tropical weather and environment was not just a fluke. It was 2014 and I had since moved to Beijing. When I asked a Thai colleague what place in Thailand I should visit next, he advised me Hua Hin. To me, I had never heard of the place, but I thought that it can't possibly be that bad, worth a visit maybe. I first spent a few days in Bangkok and then, out of curiosity, I took a slow train to Hua Hin. The train was indeed very slow and stopped a lot of times, but after about 6 hours, I finally arrived, checked into the Hilton Hotel, which is an older hotel, but with a very nice location downtown and close to the busy areas. I just want to cut in here very quickly, guys. If you ever decide to go a Hua Hin in your own country, it's always quicker to take the train, isn't it? It isn't like that in Hua Hin. It's a very, very slow train. It takes about 6 hours to get from Bangkok rail station to Hua Hin railway station. It's a milk train. It stops at every station. If you drive down or you go down in a minibus, it's about 3.5 hours to 4 hours, depending on the traffic. I like to walk along the beach to get a massage, and I enjoyed a few day trips. I had a very good time in Hua Hin, and occasionally I looked at the shop windows of some of the local real estate agents. All apartments looked really cheap to me. I also enjoyed having a beer in a bar, but the bars I normally enter are the quieter ones because I prefer not to have a shouting contest when talking to the ladies. This is on purpose. I like to have a normal conversation without making fun of the girls or otherwise be that annoying expat. They were also good company to play a game of pool with. I always offered them drinks but told them that I preferred them to drink something non-alcoholic. I do not like the thought of them getting half drunk every night. 3 days before the end of my stay, I met a nice looking lady in a massage place. Her name was Nu. That's spelled N-O-O. She was a few years younger than me and in her early 50s. I noticed that Nu spoke English much better than any other ladies and told her that she must have a foreign boyfriend. Initially she denied that, but I soon learned that she had married an old Swedish guy but separated from him a long time already, like so many others. She had lived for many years in Germany selling snacks and coffees at a train station but had returned to Thailand a few years earlier to take care of her mum. I was quite into Nu as she had a good understanding of Europe and Western guys. We spent some nice time together until I went back to Beijing. When back in Beijing, I could not really forget Nu and started making up an excuse for myself to see her soon. I then thought of all the cheap apartments that I had seen and thought, why don't I look more seriously at buying a condo in Hua Hin? This was a good reason to buy another plane ticket to Hua Hin for the upcoming Chinese New Year holiday. Only about a month after my first trip, excited, this time I took a taxi from the airport to Hua Hin and not the train. I arrived early in the morning, checked into a budget hotel. Soon I met Nu, and she further introduced me to many new Thai things over the coming days. She brought me food, suggested nice trips, and I generally learned quite a bit from her about the Thai people. I had also arranged some meetings with real estate agents. These seemed mostly British guys accompanied by pretty local ladies. I told them what my budget was and what I wanted, and they would take me to older places, either to the north or to the south of Hua Hin. Maybe the cheap condos were actually not as attractive as I thought. I would either have to tone down my wishes or increase the budget. I could do the latter, but I wasn't quite clear with myself why I actually would buy a place here. Would it be for an investment for me to stay or for renting out? Anyway, I looked at about 6 places, but I did not feel confident with any of them. After 5 days, I left for my home again, since I meanwhile realised that Nu was perhaps not for me long term. I thought that would be it and I would never go back to Hua Hin again. However, another month later, I again had itchy feet and thought of Nu. I then planned yet another trip. I spent days in the same good budget hotel and met up with Nu regularly. Again, I saw some nice places, this time with a somewhat higher budget. I also managed to open a Thai bank account. During this trip though, I did not buy anything, and when I left again, I thought that I would never return. However, you will guess correctly if you thought that I came back soon. This time I came a few days after a business trip to Singapore. I met some agents and they showed me a couple of places again. I ended up committing to a 2-bedroom condo. It was located on the 6th floor at a quite reasonable location. When I woke up the next day, I thought that perhaps it was not good value for money, but that it still wasn't really what I wanted. I suddenly didn't feel so good about buying it anymore. I phoned the agent and told him that I didn't want it. Unfortunately, that also cost me $1,500 deposit that I had paid the previous day. Anyway, that now was water under the bridge. Again, I left Hua Hin without buying a place. Somehow I didn't give up, so during the next Chinese New Year, I was there again. This time I'd made an appointment beforehand to look at a place at a development I had noticed before and liked. When I looked at it, it was nice. I was surprised that the Thai Chinese owner actually told me that it was not nice inside, as everything had not been maintained and it looked bad and did not look like anything like the photographs. I stayed polite but was quite upset, so upset in fact that after I had left the place I hit my head hard on an overhead traffic sign too low for my 6 feet. When back in China, an agent contacted me to tell me that there's a new unit had become available in the development that I had liked before. It was a ground floor unit next to the beach with direct access to a pool. Sounded good, so why not another trip? Meanwhile, it was spring 2015. I went there and looked at the unit. I decided to buy it. It was a big step, but finally I took it. I have been lucky with it since then. Just a few days after I bought it, I met a British couple. They have been renting from me every year then for 6 months. This provided me more than enough income to cover all costs when it is not rented out to that couple. I go there sometimes for a short trip. The location is fantastic. The quality is very good, especially with the direct access to the pool being much better than the other condos that just have a balcony. It is a small walk to the Market Village Mall, a small walk to the market in town, and a small walk to Soi 80, which I would call the quiet bar street, and of course directly next to the sea. My plan is now to retire early and stay there much more often. On YouTube there are some regular discussions on issues related to location, condo buying, etc. So let me now give you my opinion. I think that Hua Hin is perfect as a location. It is a bit quieter than the other places, and especially Pattaya, which suits me as well. I do not need loud and very busy places. Soi 80 has quite a number of nice quiet bars where the music is not that loud, so that I can go and have a good chat with the ladies. As I've mentioned, I initially had been shown places to the north or south of Hua Hin, as I did not have an idea of the value of location. Good condos are therefore really not as cheap as they appear in an agent shop window. Is it better to buy or to rent? I have been very lucky with renting out my condo for 6 months of the year, but this is not the case for most condos. Also, there is a lot of land and developers always build more condos, so don't count on rapid price increases when you buy. If you buy, go for location and quality instead of low price. Overall, good condos are therefore not that cheap and not necessarily a good investment if you do not have the money readily available. It is then much better to rent. For me, it was also important that I did not worry too much about sending a significant amount of money into Thailand, as all expats in Hua Hin seem to use the same retired British lawyer from Hong Kong who has a great reputation. It took me a while to buy a condo, and perhaps you think that you can be more efficient and take less time. However, in hindsight, I think that all the time was well spent. Hua Hin was unknown to me. I also did not know what I exactly wanted. I therefore now give the general advice: it is better to start renting first and then look around while there. After a few months, you then know much better what you want to buy. You may wonder what happened to Nu. When I am in Hua Hin, I still regularly see her. Since she asked me a few years ago for money the first time, I also regularly send her some. I know that Thai women asking for money is not a very good sign, but I feel I owe her a little bit. Without Nu, I would never have bought a nice where I can relax on days that I am at home stressed from work. A nice apartment that should be. Besides that, the amount I send is only minor compared to what I've heard of other people send to Thai women. It is not my intention to pay for all of her living expenses, just a little bit extra for her and her mum, which she appreciates. So there you go, guys. That's a good bit of advice there if you're thinking about buying a condo. And as I've kind of mentioned a few times in the past, I personally would never consider buying a condo. It wouldn't be for me. The simple reason being is you're tied down. You've got all the hassle you have to go through. Rent is so cheap. You can change locations as often as you want. And I just feel in Thailand, rental is a much better option. Not for everybody, but for me. Okay, and with that, we're going to go straight into our third and final story today. This is a shorter story. Quite interesting, and I'll just jump straight in as always. Hi Peter, Gary here from Dublin. I love your YouTube channel, so after listening to so many stories from the land of smiles, I thought I'd submit my own. Quick little debrief, first on who I am. I'm 45 years old. I have been single for most of my life with 2 sons who are young grown men now from a relationship that ended many years ago with my then girlfriend. I've been involved in sports my whole life, and I regularly receive compliments by people telling me I look like I'm in my 30s. I'm a well-travelled man. I get to do what I want when I want, the perks of being single, I guess. In 2019, I travelled to Thailand for the first time. My only regret is that I didn't visit years ago when I was in my 20s and 30s. It's heaven for single guys. I booked a trip with a travel agent based in Dublin. I requested a full-time tour guide as it was my first visit to the kingdom. It was an open group booking, so there would be people from different parts of the world in our group, all newbies like me. Happy days. I arrived in Bangkok 7 hours late as my flight was delayed in Dubai. I can't remember the name of the hotel I stayed, but it was close to Koh Sun Road, along the canal, possibly a Novotel. I checked in and a staff member brought my bags to my room. I was then brought to an adjacent meeting room beside reception, and I was introduced to all the other members of the tour group, all Australians, and our tour guide, a Thai woman called Dee. She was a pretty little thing who unknowingly got me very excited just by looking at me. However, I never made any advances on her as I found out that she was happily married to an Australian businessman. We spent a few days in Bangkok before we got the night train to a beautiful beach resort in Chompon called Nana Beach, a beautiful resort and location. The Australians in my tour group were older than me and some were married, so I was unsure as to how exactly I was going to meet Thai ladies without coming across as a pervert on a mission. As the rest of the tour group were older than me, they tended to go to bed early after plenty of drinks, which gave me the chance to disappear into the night to enjoy the company of the Thai ladies. The next step was another little island. I forgot the name, but you might have heard of it as several tourists have disappeared over the years on this island. The next step was Koh Samui. This is where I met a local woman called Yai, Y-A-I. She was divorced and had 2 children. The eldest child was no longer dependent on her and was working away happily, earning their own money. Yai had 3 small businesses on the island, 2 clothes shops and an antique shop selling the usual tourist trinkets. Me and Yai had a great chemistry and she acted like a second tour guide, taking me off the beaten track, and I got to see parts of the island that most other tourists don't. Anyway, holiday over, I then returned home and began to plan my return visit in April 2020 and hook up with Yai again for 4 weeks. However, this never happened because of the current situation in the world right now. Basically, my planned trip was put on hold. Koh Samui was decimated by this situation and Yai was forced to leave the island after 18 years and returned home to Isan with her son. Yai calls me every morning in Dublin when I wake up, same time every day, 11 a.m. and 11:30 p.m. every night since I left Thailand in 2019. I've told her I can't relocate to Thailand full time as I'm not financially secure. I'm not self-employed, I'm just an average worker. However, it's nice to know if things were to develop between me and Yai. She has her own house and has never pestered me for money. I have on the odd occasion sent her money, 5,000 baht here and there. It's nothing really, but it's a lifesaver for the Thais, and that includes Yai. I'm more than likely returning to Thailand in 2022, and I'm very much looking forward to enjoying the company of Yai and the Thai people. Okay, so there you go, guys. 3 good stories sent in by you. And once again, as I always say, if you've got a story, whether it's a relationship story or just an interesting story, send it to me and I'll change all the names and I'll read it out like I have these 3 today. Right, that's about it for today. Just another quick reminder, as always at the end of every video these days, I am going live. I have a live stream going from 9 until about 11 p.m. tonight. It'd be great if you guys could come along and join in the chat. That's at 9 o'clock UK time, and if you come along, I'll be delighted to see you. Okay, so until next week, guys, that's it. Thanks for listening to these 3 stories, and I'll catch up with you this evening.